So the question is your brain the universe? Today we're going to see that your brain is the universe inside itself. And this isn't just some idea that I am coming up with. We're going to be taking a look at a physicist who sees the connection between the universe and the brain, and this idea of the universe being inside itself in a certain way. And I always like when we come across these sorts of ideas that are talking about by physicists, because these are things that we have been saying for a very long time and go a lot deeper than this as well. But we're seeing that modern science is very slowly but surely starting to catch up with what we've been saying. So this is going to be very good, and I'm excited to discuss this with you. Let's bring it up right here on screen. It says, are our brains the universe within? A U.S. physicist in his book likens the universe to a cosmic brain and says we humans are miniature models of it. And now right away, you can get the idea of this is very similar to fractals, and this is very similar to the Delphic alpha, the esoteric saying, as above, so below. So physicist Melvin A. Felton Jr. proposes that the human brain is a physical model of the universe because of the structural and dynamical similarities between the two systems being detected in neuroscience and physics, and that this relationship could be the missing principle leading to the long sought after theory of everything. So what this physicist is saying is that he is likening the human brain as being a physical model of the universe because of the similarities, the structural similarities between the universe and the brain, and that this could be the missing piece for the theory of everything, which is what science has been looking for. Materialist science is essentially broken right now. They can't unify gravity with relativities, general relativity, and quantum mechanics. There's all these aspects that physics can't account for, not even getting into things like consciousness and life in general. So the interesting thing about this is that, well, what is our position in Hyperianism, for anyone that may be unfamiliar, is that, first of all, reality is not physical. There's no such thing as matter, in that there's no such thing as a mind-independent existence. Mind, as frequency, as energy, mathematical frequencies, mathematical reality, is what is primary. And then what occurs is that mind generates a reality like a dream, and this was the Big Bang, but it's a collective, persistent dream. And then via evolution and the course of history, it inserts itself into its own generated world via bodies or avatars to localize itself and to be able to explore its various transformation from a localized perspective. So the thing to understand that in Hyperianism, all is mind. What the universe is a physical manifestation of mind, when we're talking about the physical universe, and the brain is that which allows mind to localize within space-time. So we're going to talk about the differences here, because basically they're sort of just talking in terms of the universe and the brain. Now, I just want to make it clear that in Hyperianism, it's in terms of mind, and then mind exploring itself through itself. But the universe and the brain is how the mind explores itself through itself. Now, to understand what this means is that, first of all, remember, reality is just mind. It's pure mind. It's pure thought. It's a frequency domain. Then, via a asymmetrical process, a breaking of symmetry, and this relates to Fourier transforms and a lot of mathematical components that I'm not going to get into right now, it generates the realm of space-time, and this is the physical universe. And then what happens? Evolution occurs, and eventually bodies evolve. And then this allows mind, because remember, physical reality is just sort of a reflection or expression of mind. Physical bodies allow mind to explore itself in the world that it self-generated from itself, from its own mathematical data. It can now explore itself. So basically what this means is that the physical universe and the body/brain is the medium, the way in which reality as mind explores itself. So that's really important to keep in mind, because in this article, we're talking about the correlation between the universe and the brain. And that's important in our system, but our system goes beyond that by saying that reality is much more than just the universe and the brain. It's pure mind, but the universe and the brain is how it explores itself. The universe is the environment, and then the brain is the window that the mind has in the environment to explore. The universe provides that world, that environment, and then the avatars is what allows mind to explore itself in that world. Just like when you go to sleep and dream and you generate a dream world, and then you have a sort of localized view in your dream, and you can explore that. And as you're exploring your dream, what are you doing? You're actually exploring your own mind. That's what that means. So same thing with this objective reality, except it's formed by a vast multiplicity of minds throughout billions of years. This has occurred, so it's a persistent, stable dream rather than a fleeting, haphazard dream that you have when you sleep and dream. But let's move on. We have a lot to unpack here. So, and you can also see that he believes that this is the missing principle leading to the long sought after theory of everything. And as we have been saying for a long time, understanding reality in terms of frequency and in terms of mind is the true theory of everything. So what he describes as stunning correspondences between the organizational structures of the human brain and the universe can provide evidence-based answers to many of the classical philosophical questions concerning the nature of reality, the purpose of life, and the existence of gods. And I just want to reiterate that this is a physicist here who is coming up with these ideas. This isn't some, random guru or something like this. And I also want to emphasize that this is what we have been saying in terms of our system in Hyperionism. The nature of reality, we know what the nature of reality is. The nature of reality is pure mind, pure frequency. It's pure reason as expressed through mathematical data, as expressed through mathematical sinusoids, as expressed through mathematical frequency. But it's mind, not material. It's an idealist system, not a materialist system. And let's see. Oh, so nature of reality. Yes, check. The purpose of life. Yes, we understand what the purpose of life is. The purpose of life is to take our potentiality and to actualize it. That's what the whole purpose of this sort of generation of this dream world is because you have everything in potentiality that starts to become actualized as we explore ourselves, learn, grow, and evolve. So the purpose of existence is to become the most actualized, expressed versions of ourselves that we can possibly be, all of us together, helping each other as a collective do so, in addition to enjoying life, because that's another aspect that people often forget, that yes, we are here to actualize, but part of this process is also to be able to have a excellent quality of life and enjoy life as well. Because this is the dream that we have created for ourselves. We want to create a better dream. We want to increase the quality of life, which will increase our capacity for increasing actualization at the same time. So we want to create better life, better quality of life, and this will result in more actualization. It goes hand in hand. So, and then also the existence of gods. Yes, we've said this as well. As we know in Hyperionism, as we see, understand via logic and reason and the fundamental nature of reality, we are gods, and that we are potential individual gods, but together we form a collective, which you could call the God. Now, in Hyperionism, we don't like to use the word God because of its original religious connotation. We're all individual monadic minds. We're all eternal individual monadic minds, which are eternal sets of Fourier basis waves, everything you need to create any sort of wave pattern that you can that's physically realizable. And together, we form the collective. We form a collective mind. So, and this we in Hyperionism we call the absolute, or if we're just talking about the mind in general, that is the source. But in terms of all reality, all existence, which is what God is, this is the absolute in terms of Hyperionism, meaning it's all of us as a collective. All of us, we are each individual minds that form a collective that generated this dream world, that inserts ourselves into this dream world, that don't remember that we did so, and come to self-knowledge and self-actualization, realize what we are, and create this interconnected collective and learn to work together in harmony and realize consciously that we are the absolute. That's what hyper-awareness is. Hyperionism is all about giving people the tools to reach hyper-awareness. Hyper-awareness allows one to understand rationally and phenomenologically that one, and have the phenomenological experience, that one is the absolute. We are the absolute. So he claims that religion, philosophy, and science are already evolving along a trajectory leading to the realization that our brain, the organ central to our ability to experience the world, is the model of the universe, and believes there is potential synergy to be realized between physics and neuroscience if the two communities open constant dialogue about attaining a thorough investigation of the issue. There's so much I could talk about here, so I'm going to try and go as quick as possible so we can get through this fascinating article. But this is what in Hyperionism, to reach hyper-awareness, we call concept networking. You see that this individual wants a synergy between physics and neuroscience to open a dialogue with each other to investigate the correlation between the brain and the universe. And that's the thing with Hyperionism, is that we point out that humanity right now is very specialized in that they have these, person A is a physicist and only a physicist. Person B is only a neuroscience scientist and only a neuroscientist. Person C is a historian and only a historian. And everyone gets into their little tiny reality tunnels. In order to reach hyper-awareness and to develop an analog all, one has to do concept networking, which means understanding how all these apparently disparate subjects fit together to form a whole. I just mentioned 3 things just off the top of my head: physics, neuroscience, and history. Well, one would need to be able to see, for example, how history is the evolution of us as monadic minds, that the brain reflects our way to explore ourselves in a reality that is based on physical principles, that we understand how it models the physical world, but is ultimately reliant on metaphysics, which is the mental nature of reality, the frequency nature of reality. So do you see how just like instantly you have all these things connect together? They're not disparate, they're not random. They form a coherent picture, a coherent whole. That's concept networking in Hyperionism for reaching hyper-awareness. So, and then because he's also talking about religion, philosophy, and science, so that's another type of concept networking, to see the correlation between religion, philosophy, and science as well. At the beginning, and what we want to do, for example, right, like if just to be clear, if we see the correlation using concept networking between religion, philosophy, and science, many people think they're at odds, right? Many people think that there are odds with each other. But if you look at the core, and in certain ways they are, but this is the nature of the dialectic, in that you have clashing of opposites. But what happens when you understand what's really going on and you apply the dialectic is that those clash of opposites reach a higher synthesis. So for example, in Hyperionism, we would look at religion, philosophy, and science, use concept networking to see how they all fit together, and then understand dialectically how to transcend them into a higher idea. So that's what Hyperionism is. It's a higher idea. It's not religion. It's not philosophy. It's not science. It's beyond all of these things, because it is the higher synthesis that has been reached via this dialectical clash, and understanding what needs to be discarded and what needs to be kept in terms of concept networking. Let's see, continuing. At the beginning of his far-sighted and deeply considered book, The Universe Within, The Surprising Way the Human Brain Models the Universe, Felton says that his performing a comparative analysis of the structural organization and dynamics of the universe and the brain was due to insight gained from a study of Eastern thought and Hermetic philosophical teachings. The latter, of course, regards everything that exists as thoughts in the mind of God. Now, I couldn't give a better example of an individual that's sort of stumbling onto these realizations without really understanding what it is that they're doing. Because what is this person? This person is clearly beginning to engage in concept networking. This person is a physicist, but they are looking into neuroscience. They're looking at the connection between religion and philosophy, and they are looking at Eastern thought and Hermetic philosophical teachings, emphasizing that everything exists as thoughts in the mind of God. And essentially, so does Advaita Vedanta, so does Gnosticism, so does Hegelianism, and so Berkeleyanism, so many Berkeleyanism, I believe he called immaterialism. So he read up on ancient Egyptian teachings and Asian schools of thought, including Taoism, Buddhism, and Hinduism. He learned that there was some, and by the way, I want to say that just because certain things, correlations can be found, doesn't mean we agree. We are very much opposed in Hyperionism, very much opposed to mainstream literalist interpretations of religion. We are all about logic and reason. So that's important to understand. Concept networking doesn't mean that you agree with everything. It means that you are able to see where things connect and dialectically understand what you need to discard and what you need to keep. So he read up on ancient Egyptian teachings, etc. He learned that there were some and this is just, I just want to emphasize again, this is a perfect example of concept networking. People sometimes don't really understand what that is. This is a perfect example of it. You see how he's taking all this disparate information and piecing it together to form a coherent whole. And I would not be surprised at all if he was on the way to developing an analog all. So he learned that there was some resonance between me and some of these teachings, particularly the ones that more closely resemble pure metaphysical principles as opposed to the mythical dogma that can dominate religion. That's what I see. This is a perfect example. That is what I was just saying. And I'm reading this for the first time with you guys. I skimmed this very briefly. That's what I usually do when I pick these articles. I skim them very briefly, and then I more or less read them in detail for the first time with you guys. Most of the time, not always, but most of the time that's the case. And see, this is a perfect example of what I was just talking about when I said you need to, doesn't mean if you believe all the things in religion, you just take what you need to take and then discard the rest. He said the ones that resonate are the ones that more closely resemble pure metaphysical principles as opposed to the mythical dogma that can dominate religion. And that's precisely what I mean. When you look at the underlying metaphysical principle and you disregard all the absolute ridiculousness of mainstream religion, and it's in the esoteric religions that you're going to be finding the more metaphysical principles. For example, in Gnosticism, that is extremely similar to like it's based on Platonist ideas, the ideas of Plato, such as the domain of forms and reality being different aspects of mind. So Eastern philosophies teach that consciousness is the fundamental basis of reality, he writes. Now, real quick, in Hyperianism, we make a distinction between mind and consciousness. Consciousness is explicit self-awareness. Mind is not. Mind can operate in an unconscious way, but still be sentient. So in Hyperianism, it's not consciousness that's the fundamental basis of reality. It's mind. But physicists almost always use the word mind wrong. So he most likely, or the word consciousness wrong. Almost always. So he most likely means mind. That's most likely what he means. Do I know that for sure? No, but most of them do. And many scientists and philosophers believe that conscious observers play a crucial role in the quantum processes that occur in the universe. And again, this is something that we highly disagree with. Consciousness per se, such as self-awareness, is not necessary. You don't need consciousness to, say, collapse the wave function. That is not necessary. But reality is inherently mind, unconscious mind, but still experiencing evolving mind in the form of mathematical sinusoidal motion. And each mathematical sinusoid being paired with a qualitative experience with that. So he says his research has allowed him to construct a self-consistent, credible, and powerful worldview. Really? Well, it's kind of like what we did, isn't it? One that I believe will be a useful concept to humanity as we continue our trajectory through universal evolution. Well, doesn't that sound familiar? The philosopher-scientist Bernardo Kastrup is among those who have endorsed the universe within. Saying that Felton's essential point deserves very serious consideration from the academic community and readers interested in a deeper, truer understanding of the nature of what we call reality. Hey, look at that. Wouldn't that be nice? Some serious consideration. However, Felton bases his ideas entirely on controversial string theory, leading to several passages in his book being abstruse for the general reader, which tries to deal with a number of profound questions in physics, with some string theorists believing there is no equally successful theory addressing these questions. Their theory supplants subatomic particles with single-dimensional objects called strings, which are said to populate space and interact. Now, this is a very important thing to talk about because Felton's ideas are based on string theory. And guess what? Guess which materialist theory is the closest to Hyperianism? String theory. String theory is basically a materialist version of ontological mathematics, and which is the system in Hyperianism that we use to study mind and reality in general. This is the system that we use to do that. So in string theory, and here's why this is interesting and why this is such an important point. String theory supposes that reality is not based on, say, subatomic particles, but rather on strings and their modes of vibration, one-dimensional strings and their modes of vibration. So basically, if you have something, all the different particles in reality, all, atoms, electrons, quarks, protons, neutrons, all that. In string theory, what those are different manifestations of strings vibrating in different modes. So basically, all material particles in string theory can be broken down into vibratory patterns of strings. So essentially vibration. It's a little more complicated than that, of course, but for those who are just new, it's basically breaking down reality into vibration stemming from modes of vibration stemming from one-dimensional strings. Now, string theory has a lot of problems because it has to suppose, M theory has 11 dimensions. There's like superstring theory. There's so many different versions of string theory, and it has 10, 11 dimensions depending on the different versions. Some even go much higher than that. Some require ridiculous particles like tachyons, which are impossible. But the reason why string theory has problems is because they're trying to base their reality on a materialist paradigm. If they don't do that and they understand that reality is mind, then there are no problems. None of those problems plague Hyperianism. So you see, in string theory, reality is based on one-dimensional strings, and basically material particles come from their vibratory patterns, essentially, in a nutshell. In Hyperianism, it's a little different. They are based on zero-dimensional sinusoids that, as a component of those zero-dimensional sinusoids, have one-dimensional flowing points that are in a sinusoidal trajectory. And, that's a lot of, if you don't understand what that means, essentially what that is frequency, essentially vibrations. Again, a little more complicated than that. And all reality is generated from these different vibrations combining to form more complicated patterns. So it's almost the same as string theory. There are just some important differences. That is that the vibrations in string theory are based on material strings. But there's a big question, like, well, where did those strings come from? What are those strings made of? How did those strings exist? You're just breaking it down into it's turtles all the way down. You still have to give an account for how the strings exist. In Hyperianism, the vibratory patterns, the frequencies, are not based on material strings, but mind. It's thought. It's pure frequency, pure thought, mind, not matter. And we can show how mind must exist because of its mathematical net value of zero. So where you have zero in string theory, you have these one-dimensional material strings. In Hyperianism, you have zero-dimensional minds that have eternal and necessary existence due to their nature of being net zero and equivalent to nothingness. I could talk hours about that, but I'm not, because I want to get through this video really quick. But we can show that these have necessary and eternal existence. They must exist. What I mean to tell you here is that you have this individual that's clearly engaging in concept networking, and coming to many similar. I mean, we've gone much further, but is slowly coming to the conclusions that we talk about in Hyperianism all the time. And on top of that, he's basing his ideas on string theory, which is the theory in physics that is the closest to Hyperianism in ontological mathematics. It's not the same by any means, but if one had to pick one, because it both involves reality coming from vibratory patterns, the way that happens is a lot different, but it's very similar. So he's getting really, really close. It's just you don't want to base reality on, it's very materialist. The physical universe, the brain, and material strings. Well, rather it's the mind with frequency patterns that generate the material universe, that generate the brain and the body, that allows the mind to enter into the world that it has generated. And so once again, in Hyperianism, these are collections of frequencies. And if anyone out there, just throwing it out there, if anyone watching this is a physicist or a mathematician, these aren't just vague vibrations or some kind of woo-woo mysticism. This is based on Fourier mathematics, and that every single mind is a complete and consistent set of Fourier basis waves, which are able to, as if you are, able to, through their combination, through a Fourier transform, create any physically realizable waveform, no matter how complicated it may be. And that, of course, entails the universe. That can be as complicated as the universe, meaning we can use these sinusoidal waves to construct a existence as complicated as the universe itself. And we've done so. It's just up to humanity to wake up and realize that it has done that. This is why the main goal of Hyperianism is to give humanity the tools to reach hyper-awareness, to go from basic self-awareness, basic consciousness, to hyper-awareness, where we realize that we did this and can begin to construct a world based on the knowledge that we are the gods of this reality, and it can be whatever we so will when we work together instead of fighting amongst each other. Now, if you are noticing that I'm talking quickly, that's because there's so much in this article that I want to get to, and it's great, and I want to pack as much in as I possibly can. So, really interesting so far, and I think that this is a really interesting example because you have this individual who is, on their own sort of beginning to engage in concept networking, and in doing so coming to the same conclusions, not the same, but similar, starting to come to similar conclusions that we have. So framework for modeling the universe. Felton maintains that string theory offers a theoretical framework for modeling the universe in such a way that the parallel between the universe and the brain can be seen in great detail. And everything that he says about string theory, you can corresponds to Hyperianism, because Hyperianism uses the whole idea of reality being generated by these modes of vibration. The only difference is, well, not the only difference. We don't have 11 dimensions or tachyons or any of that insanity. It's not necessary once you understand that reality is mind. These are generated from frequency patterns that are thought forms. That they are thoughts, not any kind of material string. They originate from 0D minds and 1D flowing points that flow in a sinusoidal trajectory. A domain of frequency also that generates via Fourier transforms the domain of spacetime. So string theory has enabled various advances in mathematics, dealing with black holes, the cosmology of the early universe, and nuclear physics, and because potentially it allows for a unified description of gravity and particle physics. It's seen as a candidate for the theory of everything, embracing all universal forces and forms of matter. So I want to say again, everything that they're saying about string theory is true of Hyperianism and ontological mathematics. It has the power to do the same thing as what they're describing here. But some string theorists have been criticized for jumping on the bandwagon to the detriment of the pursuance of alternative approaches. Its great popularity among theoretical physicists being partly due to the financial structure of academia and the competition for scarce resources. You can see, capitalism and dogma eking its way in here. Anyway, despite his endorsement of Felton, Bernardo Kastrup is one of those who is skeptical of string theory. In his essay, Reasonable Inference from Quantum Mechanics, he writes that wild and ungrounded speculation isn't a privilege of non-physicists, such as popular writers in healthcare and parapsychology. And so this is something that the whole idea with string theory is that and Hyperianism, well, more too on Hyperianism. In Hyperianism, we do not engage, and Kastrup is talking about string theory, but I want to, because people say similar things with regard to Hyperianism, and I want to correct this misconception. We do not engage in wild and ungrounded speculation. Because some might think that, well, how do you know we're minds? How do you know it's based on mathematics? How do you know it's not this other thing or this other thing? We're not just pulling ideas out of our ass. It's these ideas. We're rationalists. So these are rational, necessary consequences of existence. When we explore reality based on the principle of sufficient reason and everything that must happen in accordance with that law, this is what we get. We're not just pulling random ideas. This is based on a rational system engaging in a deductive reasoning process. So it's the opposite. It is more rigorous than empiricism, that uses the scientific method, because the scientific method does not have to be compatible with rationalism. For example, the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics is completely irrational. Every scientific theory that has randomness within itself, such as random mutation, a random collapse of the wave function, all of that is completely anti-reason and is not compatible with reason, is not compatible with logic, because randomness is the lack of reason, the absence of reason, and the answer of an answer, and the absence of an answer, and the absence of an explanation. Randomness is what you say when you can't explain something or give a reason for something. There is no mechanism by which randomness can operate, because then it wouldn't be random. So scientific materialism and empiricism engages in more speculation than say Hyperianism. But anyway, so Bernardo says, today physics is indulging in the most far-fetched feast of speculations ever concocted by the human mind. Multiple different types of parallel universes, each type potentially comprising multi-dimensional infinity of such universe, 10 spatial dimensions, many of which are supposedly curled up into tight little knots of extraordinary topological complexity. So, and it says parsimonious. This is not, and that's right. It's not parsimonious. It's a law of the it breaks Occam's razor, which is a principle of parsimony. And so his Kastrup's criticism of string theory in this capacity is absolutely right. Multiple dimensions, parallel universes, infinity universes, 10 spatial dimensions curled up tight into little knots. For him to criticize this is absolutely valid. And why is that? Well, because these all contradict reason. Everything that he mentioned does not play a part in Hyperianism and ontological mathematics. And that's why Hyperianism and ontological mathematics is superior to string theory. None of these criticisms that Kastrup brings up plays a part in Hyperianism or ont math. Why? Because they're logically inconsistent. They contain rational contradictions. I could get into many reasons why this is, but I want to get through this awesome article so we can have a nice compact video. So Felton also bases part of his discussion on the physicalist theory of the American neuroscientist Christoph Koch, about how the brain produces consciousness. Also controversial when set up against the latest theories of analytic or monistic idealism, as promoted by Kastrup, for example, which regards reality as grounded in a transpersonal form of consciousness, which is fundamental, primal, and causal, that our reality arises from consciousness, actually is consciousness, and not the other way around. So Felton must be read with certain caveats kept in mind. So this is actually extremely interesting, because Felton is going with a physicalist theory, which says that the brain can produce consciousness, whereas Kastrup is going with a monistic idealist version explanation of existence, which regards reality as grounded in consciousness, not matter. So this is very interesting. So because Hyperianism would actually be a blend or a synthesis. We can engage in concept networking with their ideas here. So we agree very much with certain things that Felton is saying, but Felton is much too materialist. That's why string theory shouldn't be based on matter. You should go with ont math, which is based on mind. So, and all the criticisms that Kastrup brings up is absolutely correct. The brain, it's 100% illogical and impossible. It's a rational impossibility for the brain to be able to produce consciousness or just mind and sentience in general. It can't happen. Doesn't matter. You can never, ever produce a materialist theory that can account for it, because it's a logical impossibility. I've done many videos on this. Check out my videos on, I think it's called Why Consciousness Could Not Have Evolved. I have a lot of videos on the subject, but Kastrup is absolutely right. Hyperianism is a monistic idealism, which is what Kastrup promotes. Monistic idealism means that there is one thing in existence, and that thing is mind, meaning that everything around you is just a manifestation of different permutations or combinations of mind. In Hyperianism, it's a little more complicated than this, because it's not just a monistic idealism, but it's also a dual aspect mathematical monism, meaning that essentially, and a rationalist system, basically meaning all reality is reason. Reason ultimately can be studied and understood through mathematics. This is also mind in terms of frequency. It is living, and it is in motion, and it can be qualitatively experienced. That's the dual aspect of it. It has an experience. It has qualia associated with it. And in Hyperianism, it is mind that is primary, not consciousness. Mind is just mental motion and sentience in general, whereas consciousness is a very complex and sophisticated form of mind that is engaging in self-reference. By the way, self-reference is how one gains in consciousness. When mind engages in self-reference, guess what? It becomes aware of itself, that self-awareness. So guess what the other component in reaching hyper-awareness is, in addition to concept networking? That is metacognition, reaching higher and higher and higher degrees of this self-reference and metacognition. So this is how we go up levels of consciousness. And so for humanity to reach hyper-awareness, not only do they have to engage in concept networking, but they also have to engage in metacognition, which is higher and higher degrees of being able to have that self-referential aspect and understanding not only that, oh, I am an I, but going even further than that and realizing, oh, I am an eternal mind, and going even further than that, oh, not only am that, but I am a node in the collective of eternal minds. Not only that, but oh, wait, we actually make up and form the absolute, which is one mind, which is what I am, which is what you are, which is what we all are. So not only is concept networking needed, but metacognition is also needed to raise one's awareness. And the other component necessary, just to be complete, I won't talk about it too much, but is the phenomenological aspect, which is being able to like intuitively experience and know and feel what it is to actually be in that state of hyper awareness and consciousness. In other words, not just knowing it like pen and paper logically, that's incredibly important, but also to have the phenomenological aspect of experiencing of what it is like to be. And there are many exercises one can do to develop that. And I'm working on a new book right now that will absolutely be included in my new book. So there is a gnat, go away. So anyway, I just want to point out that it's very interesting because you have Felton and Kastrup, and Hyperionism synthesizes and goes beyond both their views. Kastrup has a interesting view. Felton has also an interesting view, but they're both right and wrong in certain respects. So, intriguingly, though, Felton argues that the universe has increased in complexity so much that, with the appearance of humans, it has crossed the threshold where it displays the ultimate self-similar characteristic. I love this article because it's every time I say something, the next thing just references what I just said. So the universe increases in complexity. That's what we were talking about. And with the appearance of humans, it crosses a threshold where it displays the ultimate self-similar characteristic, a subsystem which is a model of the whole. If this is the case, he says, it would hardly be the only instance of self-similarity displayed throughout the universe. I might add that the ubiquitous spiral form and pattern, which I've written about extensively elsewhere, is a good example of self-similarity in nature and human culture. All right, let's break this down. So I have not read his book, okay? And remember, I'm reading much of this for the first time with you. But he's talking about evidence for the self-similarity in nature and human culture by referencing the spiral form and pattern. All right, well, let's talk about this. Because in Hyperionism, what is the fundamental thing? Well, it's mind. But what does that mean mathematically? It's a sinusoid. What do sinusoids rely on for their existence? A circle. So what that means, if anyone is familiar with basic trigonometry, every time you have sinusoidal waves, mathematically, you also have a circle. Because sinusoids are functions of a circle. They are equivalent to one another. They're two ways of looking at the same information. So in Hyperionism, it's a little more complex than that, and that is a pun because it's a complex circle that utilizes not only real numbers, but complex numbers and imaginary numbers on the Argand diagram or complex plane. So what this means is that in Hyperionism, reality is based on sinusoids, frequencies, mind, and this inherently is a circular pattern, not just a circular pattern, it's literally a circle. And guess what? Spirals rely on circles. You can't, if there were no such thing as circles, there would be no such thing as spirals. So it's interesting to note that he's using the concept of a spiral to show this ubiquitous pattern in nature when it's Hyperionism's position that all reality is based on sinusoids, which means ultimately that reality is based on circles operating together in different modes. And again, if that sounds kind of weird, just remember, circles are equivalent to sinusoids. Those are waves. These are frequency patterns. You can use these frequency patterns and combine them to create any pattern you'd like, any physically realizable waveform, even if it's as complex as the universe itself. So that's not like some weird far-fetched thing. That's just Fourier mathematics. It's used everywhere in quantum mechanics, signal processing. Your smartphone wouldn't work without it. Like Fourier mathematics is everywhere. So towards the end of his book, Felton includes subchapters entitled The Nature of God and the Purpose of Life. In the former, he likens the universe to a cosmic brain, which is in a non-conscious state and thus able to serve as a conscious God, thus unable to serve as a conscious God, taking an active role in events. The question arises, are we dreamed up by a sleeping cosmic brain? What a fantastic article. I could just not, concoct a more beautiful article just supporting our points, just in a more materialist fashion. So Bernardo thinks, this is Felton. Felton thinks that the universe is a cosmic brain, but this cosmic brain isn't conscious. It's unconscious. So it's not like a god in the sky that's watching you and gets really mad when you touch yourself. It is instead a non-conscious brain, and then the person in the article says, are we dreamed up by a sleeping cosmic brain? So in Hyperianism, what have I been saying? It's an unconscious mind. Now, the quick caveat there is that this unconscious mind is a collective mind because it's formed by a multiplicity of individual minds. But that caveat aside, reality is an unconscious mind. It's not conscious, and that it generates this dream world via Fourier transform, Fourier mathematics of frequency patterns breaking symmetry and giving rise to space-time extension, space-time functions. It generates this dream world in which we, as this mind, insert ourselves into when bodies, brains, and eyes and all the mechanisms necessary for experiencing that world arise. So Felton is very, very close. He's just getting rid of the mind. He's not including the mind aspect. He's only talking about matter. So if the universe is a brain, where did that brain come from? How does that brain exist? How is that possible? In Hyperianism, that brain, which is the universe, doesn't always exist. It's a mind that is eternal and must exist due to its net result being mathematically equivalent to zero. Check out my other videos for information on that. And this mind generates the physical universe. And then through evolution, it gets populated with beings that then can explore the world that it was generated from. So the important idea to remember here is that, yes, you can say that the universe is a brain, but that's not all that there is. So in Hyperianism, you are an eternal mind, not a brain. Your brain is a filtering mechanism that you as a mind link to order to experience a localized reality. So the brain and the mind are not the same thing. The brain is what the mind, the mind is what the mind links to the brain. Now, in Hyperianism and Ontmath, the mind, the physical universe is essentially the brain of the mind of reality. It's if the absolute, or rather the source, the mental aspect of existence is the primary reality, and the universe is the way that primary reality generates an environment to explore itself in. So in other words, just what Felton is saying is correct, but he's leaving out that's not fundamental. The universe being the brain is not fundamental. The universe is a mind that then I'm sorry. Reality, existence is a mind that generates the universe. And then what Felton says more or less applies. This universe is now an environment for which the mind can insert itself into via the multiplicity of perspectives of humans, or sentient creatures in general. Of course, with the caveat always being that this mind is a collection of eternal, individual, unique monadic minds. So we are each eternal, individual, unique monadic minds. Then we begin to explore and learn our world. We raise in consciousness, and ultimately realize that we are the universe experiencing ourselves. If you want to know why we don't realize that right away, check out my video. Oh, geez, what was it? Brain filter theory. Brain filter theory. Something along the lines of brain filter theory. I did one recently too. God, I don't remember. Anyway, I've done a lot of videos on this. So the question arises: are we dreamed up by a sleeping cosmic brain? For Felton, it follows that we humans, as miniature models of the universe, as above, so below, so within, so without, as the Hermetica says. This is such a good art. I said that thing. So, that we humans are miniature models of the universe are the closest thing to the traditional concept of God. For, in our waking states, we can make decisions that affect events, reminding me immediately of the words of the English philosopher novelist Colin Wilson, that man has no alternative but eventually to become responsible for the whole universe. I love that. And so what is this person saying? What is Felton saying? That we as humans, as miniature models of the universe, are the closest thing to the traditional concept of God. And what has Hyperianism been saying? We are God. You are God. I am God. We are both individual, unique, eternal minds, and together we form a collective. We are all eternal. Yeah. Anyway, this Felton fellow is very individual, very interesting, because he's obviously engaging in concept networking. He just hasn't shaken his materialist ideology and his materialist dogma. He needs to go from materialism to idealism, and from empiricism to rationalism. I think it may be easy not easy, but easier for him to go from empiricism to rationalism, because he's engaging so much in this concept networking, which is requiring him to exercise his rational function a lot by being able to connect these things. Would he go from monism to, or would he go from materialism to idealism? I don't know. He seems like a interestingly intelligent individual who is obviously beginning to develop an analog all. So you see, this is a really good example of someone who is not hyper aware, but they are beginning to become beyond mere self-consciousness. They're certainly not hyper aware, but they are starting to develop that analog all. This is just like individuals have an analog I, which is a model of themselves that they identify with. Analog all being a model of reality that one begins to identify with in some capacity. It's a little more complex than that, but you can see this person is developing this through these concepts that he is developing. So, I like that quote a lot. At the most fundamental level, Felton believes the universe essentially is information processing. Do you see this? I am continuously. This individual is quite close, and I am impressed. So apparently, for Felton, the universe essentially is information processing at a fundamental level. So this individual needs to give up materialism. Because if you get down to it, information processing is what Hyperianism is based on, being mathematical information, a system of reason that is alive, self-transforming, in motion. That's sort of what being alive means, that it's in motion and has the capacity for experience. Not that it's conscious, not that it necessarily knows what it is, but that it is in motion and that it has the capacity for experience. But it's information processing, and that it's mathematical information. And so this individual says the universe essentially fundamentally is information processing. This person's getting they need to ditch their materialist beliefs and understand that reality is rational and mental. If he switches to mathematical mind, right there you have a system of information that is self-processing. So every physical object that has ever existed or ever will, and every event that has ever happened or ever will, is part of this processing. Rather like the concept of the Akashic record in theosophy and anthroposophy. Therefore, Felton maintains the purpose of human life is to participate in this processing, and whether we realize it or not, we are participating with every activity we engage. This person is, they just, someone please tell this individual to just become Hyperion at this point. They're not too far off. So, and hey, please remember, I don't know anything about this guy's beliefs apart from what I'm reading right now. So if in his book he also talks about, reptilian acid monsters under the hollow earth or something. Like, don't, I didn't know that. But based on what he's saying here, very close. Not the same by any means, but it shouldn't be hard for this person to transition and realize that this is very similar to Hyperianism. Someone send this individual this video and say, hey, just become Hyperianism at this point. So let's see. So therefore, Felt maintains the purpose of human life is to participate in this processing, and whether we realize it or not, we are participating with every activity in which we engage. Yeah. So in Hyperianism, we are that process itself and processing ourselves. And that sounds very cold and mechanistic, but it's live, it's living, it's thriving. It's just we're talking about it in a way that's in like, you know, like physicist terminology. So it comes across that way. But it's vibrant and thriving with life. If any of you have ever done like a psychedelic trip and have seen the vibrant patterns, this is what we're talking about. The beautiful combination, the fractals that one experiences. This is like the frequency processing that we're talking about. When one feels the connectivity and the unity of the universe all around them. When one feels themselves like in the tree across the way, and just the unity of all reality. This is also what we're talking about. So it's not this cold, dry, mechanistic thing. But when we're talking about it in these formal terms, it may sound like that. I just want to emphasize it's not necessarily that way. So human life participates in this processing, and whether we realize it or not, we participate with every activity we engage. Yeah. So in Hyperianism, all there is are mathematical minds. Every single one of us is an individual, self-transforming, self-determining, deterministic system, mathematical mind. And this reality is the expression of our collective information processing. It is the space-time Fourier transform of our collective frequency information. And what happens is that this is a pattern that we have formed, information, and a pattern of information that we can experience and insert ourselves into. And we are ourselves systems of information processing our own internal information to form the most perfect pattern, reach higher and higher degrees of awareness, and eventually realize that we are the ones that generated this, and then work together to create to increase quality of life, increase everything that we possibly can to have a beautiful and wondrous experience that we have with each other, rather than the hellish experience that this world is in right now due to capitalistic, low conscious, rich elite billionaires who just want to have a fantastic life at the expense of the rest of the world and create like a slave-like hierarchy. So so it strikes me that this notion is not too far removed from Jung's myth of meaning, which thinks of human purpose as the universe being made conscious of itself through the agency of human consciousness. In that case, might the cosmic brain be waking up? This is a great article. It's just so... It's also a little frustrating because if this person doesn't, it's just, they're so close to Hyperianism. I mean, there's huge differences. Don't get me wrong. There are still huge differences. But, it shouldn't be such a far leap for this person to be able to understand that. So thinking of human purpose as the universe being made conscious of itself through the agency of human consciousness. In that case, might the cosmic brain be waking up? That's just, I've been talking about this whole time. So yes, we as eternal monadic minds, we are the mind collective of reality that generated this reality, to put ourselves into this reality, to explore, learn, and grow information processing, to realize that we have done so, and realize that we are the generators of this reality, to become lucid, to wake up. And what's so ironic about this, when this individual says, in that case, right, so this is what's so ironic about this. Human purpose as the universe being made conscious of itself, through the agency of human consciousness. In that case, might the cosmic brain be waking up? What's so ironic about this, and it's so frustrating. Yes, it is. That's you. You're saying it right now. It will wake up as soon as you realize that it's you. Like, hi, hello, Might the cosmic brain be waking up? Yes, it's trying to through you right now. And all you have to do is recognize it. Just like an animal that doesn't recognize itself in the mirror and it thinks it's this other creature. It's like, the dog that barks at its reflection because it doesn't realize that it is itself. And then finally, when humans, gain self-consciousness, they go, oh, that's my reflection. That's me. So the frustrating part when this individual and other people are like, well, could it be that the cosmic brain is waking up? That's you. Yes, and it's you. It would if you would just recognize your reflection. And this metaphorical reflection is literally the sentence that they're writing. You see how on the cusp they are. It's almost mind-bending how ironic it is. I hope that some of you out there know. I know my regular viewers do, but if you're new to this, I hope one understands, because so this is the development of the analog all, and even if one realizes that they are the absolute waking up, that's not necessarily hyper-awareness yet, but that's a step on the way to becoming hyper-aware. And so, yes, as I realize that I am the absolute, which I do, and any hyper-aware individual does, this is the consciousness of the universe realizing itself. So, yes, I am the consciousness of the universe. Hi, hello. And so are you. As soon as you realize it, you must realize it, and then you are, because that is what consciousness is. Just like the person looking at their reflection in the mirror, they will become self-aware as soon as they realize that that is them. It is a realization, and then one becomes self-aware. It's a little more complicated than that, of course, but you get the idea. For one to realize that you are the consciousness of the universe is simply to recognize it, to recognize your reflection in this world that is your reflection, that is self-generated by you, by us. And so every single one of us, when we realize that we are the consciousness of the absolute, forms the collective consciousness of the absolute. Because it's not just singularly me that is the consciousness of the absolute, or singularly you that is the consciousness of the absolute. We, us, are the consciousness of the absolute. We are the collective conscious of ourselves. So when you realize it, the collective I gains more consciousness. You realizing it are a part of me coming to consciousness, and me realizing it is a part of you coming to consciousness, because we are in that collective. And once we all realize this is where world problems get solved. All world problems, when this consciousness is attained, and humanity must achieve this or they will die. Modern civilization as we know it will destroy itself, whether that be from nuclear war or climate change or whatever world disaster. Humanity has to realize and attain this hyper-awareness, because once that is attained, all of the major world problems are no longer an issue. Why? Because for me to hurt you would be to hurt myself. So like all these countries that have nukes pointing at each other, guess what they would do? They would just dismantle them. Done. Instantly. Once humanity is hyper-aware, that wouldn't even be a question. It would just be done. Why? Because it would be like having a knife in your chest and you go, oh, I need to pull this out. Like it's that obvious. It is that obvious for those who are hyper-aware. This is why the world has to level up, reach a new awareness for all these problems to melt away, because the world is not cooperating right now. It's under forced cooperation because they have like a gun pointed to their head as all these different countries have nukes pointed at each other. So essentially what needs to happen is that once this occurs, all problems melt away, because one might, just for example, well, how do I know that, if country A puts their nukes away, how do we know that country B won't suddenly just, not put their nukes away and take advantage and conquer that country? How do we know that won't happen? If hyper-awareness is achieved, That would never happen. It would be unthinkable, because it would just be like me shooting myself in the foot, or me taking a knife and chopping my hand off for a country to just attack and dominate and destroy another. We look at all the craziness going on in Ukraine right now. That is just the world destroying itself. That's an unconscious entity and a body divided against itself. It's a schizophrenic mind that's deteriorating. So, anyway, that's a very ironic sentence, and it's a very frustrating sentence, because some people are so close, and it would lead to just an infinitely better world. So, in that case, might the cosmic brain be waking up? Yes, my friend. Or from the idea that the evolution of the human brain has enabled us to enter into and participate in a primal universal consciousness, rather than the brain generating and closing a discrete consciousness confined to each individual. That's a complicated one, and that would totally derail the conversation, so I'm not going to address that last thing. But that is, I want to emphasize just how much that this article sort of demonstrates, I think it's a really fantastic example of someone on this journey of starting to see. This is really fascinating here, because we have this example of a transitory period. This person is in a transitory phase from going from basic self-awareness and self-consciousness to hyper-awareness. They are not hyper-aware. Let me make that very, very clear. They are not. But they are more than self-aware. They're starting to develop that analog all, even if they don't realize it yet. They're starting very, very, very slowly to recognize themselves in that mirror. And this is a fantastic example of that, a fantastic example of concept networking and everything that goes into that. Now, I want to make it clear that Hyperianism is much, much more, for anyone who's new, much, much more than this. And it's not based on materialism at all. It's a monist, idealist, dual aspect rationalist system. And the whole pinnacle of Hyperianism is giving humanity the tools to reach hyper-awareness so that we can transform the world. So this was a fantastic article, and I hope that there's a lot. Watch this video a couple times if you need to. There is a lot in here, and I am just really glad that we took a look at this article, because I think it is packed with information that one can use to really, it's fascinating to me to see this, transitory period from one form of consciousness to another. They're in that interim, that transitory phase. So, my friends, let's spread this information and wake up the world. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I want to remind you all that I have a lot more videos. Check them out. If you're new to my channel, please like and subscribe. Please do it if you haven't. Spread this information. That's how we wake up the world, by spreading this information, so people start to recognize themselves in the mirror. Please like, please share, please subscribe, so that we can get this information going out. I also want to say, if you enjoy my work, if you ever feel like you've learned something or gotten something from my videos, consider supporting on Patreon. It helps out a lot. I want to give a big shout out to all the Patreon supporters, especially Renaissance Fairy, Trent, Cassidy, Michael, Evie, Alan, Angela, Maria, Brian, Chubby Bunny, High Expectations Counseling, and Jordy, and our newest supporter, Nicole. Thank you all so much. Consider supporting on Patreon. The link will pop up right over here. You'll get access to our weekly secret live streams and hidden Discord server, The Citadel, and it ensures that I can keep creating. Thank you.